Hey everyone, today I will show you how to draw hair for your anime character in a few simple steps. I'll be using Clip Studio Paint by Celsius, who are the sponsor of this video. But of course you can use any app or even try achieving the result with traditional media if you like. I have prepared this head earlier to show you how to add hair step by step. I will be adding a layer behind the head and one in front of it. So there's a kind of sandwich situation with the head layer between two hair layers. I start by marking a spot on my character's head. It's the spot on your head where the roots are visible and its location depends on the hairstyle you are going for. You can put it in the middle or slightly on the sides. With styles like partings, the spot becomes a line. Next I create a silhouette by drawing lines around the head following its overall shape. The flow of the lines roughly points back to that spot on the head we marked earlier. The direction of your lines is important. Try to keep the growing point in focus and direct your lines towards it, just like a fountain. As this layer of hair will end up behind the head, I only need to draw the silhouette. So all I'm doing here is creating a flat shape. There is no need for much detail at this step and you can be quite rough with your line work. The goal is to create a shape that is nicely balanced against the head. Imagine the different ways you can fit a circle into a star. You also want to have a harmonic variation of thicker and thinner hair strands. Same goes for how the hair strands are bent. Of course, it also depends on the hairstyle you want. With shorter hair, if all the curves you draw go in the same direction, it can quickly look gelled and stiff. So to keep a more natural look, it helps to have a few outliers here and there. Using the sketch underneath as a reference, I make sure the hair silhouette stays outside of the head shape, as I don't want the bald head to suddenly pop up behind the hair. With the silhouette for the hair done, I check whether there are any unbalanced or weird looking areas. So first I fill the shape with some color on a new layer, just to have more contrast with the background and make the shape visible. With Clip Studio Paint's Liquify tool and both layers selected or merged, I can simply push hair strands around, inflate them or make them thinner. I can't recommend using the Liquify tool enough, because it enables you to fix mistakes without the immediate need to erase and redraw your work, but you can directly work on the overall shape and after a few little tweaks, the shape appears more harmonic. If you are having a hard time imagining the silhouette because the sketch of the head is too distracting, you can select the layer with the face and add your flat hair layer to the selection to fill them with color on a separate layer. That might help you figure out where you need to make adjustments. If you choose to draw traditionally, unfortunately there is no way to use Liquify. You will have to erase parts of your drawing and try to figure out the correct shape by trial and error. A window or a light table can help you though. By flipping the drawing regularly, unbalanced areas are easier to spot and fix. Next I will draw hair that covers parts of the face. The formula overall is pretty similar. Starting from my reference point, I draw a few lines. This time though, I draw them explicitly going outwards from that marked spot, growing towards the forehead. Unlike the first step, I don't just draw a flat shape this time, but instead I draw the single strands explicitly. Again, it basically works like a water fountain, with the hair flowing out of the growing point. You want to have a variety of thick and thin strands, as well as a balanced amount of variation considering their bending. For the character I chose, the bangs only cover parts of the eyes, but aren't much longer. Only around the ears do I draw them a bit longer. Still, I need to pay attention to the head shape. There can be strands of hair that go beyond the silhouette I created in the first step. Actually, that makes the whole layering much more appealing when parts of the silhouette are still dominantly visible. But we don't want to overdo it. As always, it comes down to finding a middle ground to keep it harmonic. To check whether the new layer of hair matches with the previously drawn layer, I fill this layer with color too. My preferred way of filling the shape is to use the Magic Wand tool. I click on the outside of the line art and then invert the selection. Then I create a new layer on top of the silhouette layer and underneath the line art we just created. Now when I use the fill bucket on this new layer, it will fill in the selection. I'll do some tweaking just like before. I select both layers, the line art and flat color layer, and use the Liquify tool on any irregularities I notice. I push the strands of hair to more fitting places, bloat strands or pucker them. A rule of thumb is that things in the foreground are bigger than things in the background. So hair that is closer to the viewer typically looks better when the strands are a bit thicker, and hair that's on the outer fringe of the head often looks better when they are a bit smaller. Technically you could call it a day with a second layer of hair, but to add just a few more details I like to go for another round. For that I use the growing point and start drawing even more strands of hair. This time they are a bit shorter because I don't want to fully cover up the work that I did on the second layer. The next step is quite self-explanatory. Before starting though, it helps to lower the opacity of all 3 layers. To do that I first create a selection of the head shape and then delete that selection from the lowest blue layer, almost like a cookie cutter. Then I can pull the layer to the top of the head layer and underneath the 2 other hair layers. Now I can group them and lower the opacity of the folder they are in. This way I can use all 3 layers as a guide for creating my line art. While tracing the sketch I am not always following it down to every single detail, but here and there I like to add some extra little strands of hair, just to give it more liveliness. Also I might extend some strands of hair or do some general changes. In the end it comes down to how satisfied you are with the sketch. If you feel it is good the way it is, you can also simply trace it without doing anything new to it. Now it's finally time to add some color. First I fill the hair with a base color. With the line art, areas of hair around the neck and ears are typically open in some places. This means the magic wand tool won't give us what we need, so we need some way to close those gaps without actually adding anything to the line art. The trick is to create a separate new layer just for this purpose. On this layer I simply add a few lines to close any gaps I see. Now I make every layer invisible except for the line art and the helper layer. The magic wand tool will follow the overall shape of both layers, and once again I click on the outside, then invert the selection, which will turn it into a selection of the inside of the shape. And then I can simply fill it with a flat gray base color. Aside from providing the base color of the hair, this solid layer has also another purpose. If I lock the layer using this button, only those pixels that already have color can be drawn into. In other words, you don't have to worry about staying within the lines. Here I use the gradient tool to add a gradient with a darker color, and it will automatically only fill in the shape that we already have. To add some basic shadows, I take my paintbrush and follow the shape of my gradient roughly to add some harder shadows. I switch between the base and the shadow color by using the color pick tool. My goal isn't to work super cleanly, but to create a basic light situation with some distinctive lights and shadows. With the same paintbrush at a smaller size, I paint some even darker tones and add more contrast and structure. And now it's time to do a little cleaning up. With the G pen I go in and use the lines as an orientation to polish the strands of hair by giving them the flat base color back. It's not important whether you use the G pen, any other hard brown brush will do. The only thing you want to make sure is to have the areas you paint sharp and pointy, so they make a nice contrast to the soft gradients and smudgy painting style from before. To add some more colors, other than the variety of neutral grays, I pick a subtle violet tone and simply paint a few strokes here and there, just so it looks a bit more interesting but not overall purple. With the bigger airbrush, I also put some light bluish tones into the mix. For some more texture, I go back to the G pen and draw little triangles onto the lighter areas of hair. With this simple method I create the impression that the strands of hair are more detailed and accentuated. Spread them evenly throughout the whole head and you get a nice consistent look that distracts the viewer from paying attention to the rougher areas. Lastly, to bring the highlights and shadows together some more, I like to use the airbrush on overlay mode and enhance the shadows and highlights by painting over the head with either a lighter or darker color. Longer hair can be done with a similar approach. This time though we have to put even more focus on the overall shape and less on the individual hair strands. Again I start with the layer that will end up behind the head. As I want to draw a ponytail hairstyle, I don't need to consider the whole silhouette at this point, but only where the hair is visible, in this case on the right side. With a few strokes I draw lines flowing out of the spot I marked and stop roughly around the shoulder area to end the ponytail in a little swirl. It might look easier at first, because longer hair has more gravity and there aren't as many strands of hair that are outliers and pointing in different directions. Nevertheless, you want to have a nice structure, so you still need to pay attention to the shapes and balance. Then I close the layer by drawing a line from the neck up to the marked spot so that I can use the magic wand tool again. After making the selection, I fill the hair with color on a separate layer. Then I use my cookie cutter method again to make the character visible again. Create a selection of the head and erase the parts on the hair layers that you don't need covering the face. And with Liquify I can do small adjustments to the shape again. I mark my spot again and draw lines starting from the ears orbiting around the head directed towards the marked spot. These lines are going to be the hair that is laying flat on the head because they are bound at the location where the ponytail grows out from. Again, I close the line art and fill it with color to have a better overview of the shape, and it's easier to figure out any imbalances that need fixing with Liquify. Overall though, as this layer is mostly covered by the next one, we don't need to be as tidy and clean this time. Unlike with the shorter haircut, this time the third layer of hair is the one that covers parts of the face. I draw a curved line roughly going down from the marked spot towards the left eyelid. Then I add a few little pointy strands of hair for detail, getting closer with my line towards the ear area. I close the shape by using a bigger curve that follows the head shape. So we end up with something that almost looks like one half of the Pepsi logo. For the other side of the parting hair, I draw a crescent moon that also goes straight down to the ears. And all that's left to do now is to fill the shape with color and do some adjustments with Liquify if needed. Now I can create the line art. Put all the layers in one folder and lower the opacity so you have an easier time tracing your sketch. The coloring process works much like the first example for the short hair. I need to create a flat base color layer with the shape of the hair, so I keep my attention towards the area around the neck and ears. Once again I create a helper layer to close the gaps in my line art so that I can use the magic wand tool to create my selection. This time I fill the resulting shape with a flat reddish base color. Then lock the layer, create a gradient with a darker color and paint some rough shadows and highlights by switching between the colors using the color pick tool. The rest is basically the same as with the shorter hair, adding darker shadows and shifts in hue, refining shapes and details and bringing everything closer together with a big airbrush. Of course, that also works for other hairstyles. Here for example I chose to go for an open hairstyle. Just like before, I start with a silhouette and layer after layer I piece the individual parts together. So after the overall silhouette, I go for the sides to draw something like a curtain, and lastly on top I draw the bangs. One last tip, Clip Studio Paint also has really great 3D models that make drawing heads easier. As this tutorial was about drawing hair, I didn't get to explain how I draw faces, so if you struggle with that, you can use these head models as reference to make everything a bit easier. Anyway, that's it. If you liked my art and want to see more of it, I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. The username is always Lauran, but you can find links in the description. If you have any tips you would like to add or even want me to address in a future video, feel free to share them in the comments. Likes are always appreciated as well. Thanks so much for watching and until next time.